Welcome to the How Good Is It? We're going to talk about Isabeau. Now, I've made a video before about Isabeau, and I've said I'm going to talk about Isabeau, and I titled the video Isabeau, and I've made a thumbnail about Isabeau. But really, it was the Isabeau witch version. I just didn't expect them to make another Isabeau, so now I had to go back and change the title of my old video to say Isabeau witch version. So now this is just the normal Isabeau, just to introduce more confusion, because the developers, or rather Magia, the mangaka for Magia, just decided to have another Isabeau. So we're gonna have to deal with this now. The other Isabeau that we had, the witch version, was a dark type blast gorilla. So all about blast, but now we're gonna have a dark type Magia character. Wow, amazing. So let's go down the list. Okay, first off, I'm gonna mention one thing. She has 2 Exaltis, 2 charge discs. I can tell you right now, she has absolutely no synergy with any charge strategy whatsoever. So the fact that she has 2 charge discs is just for balancing, because my guess is that the developers realized that giving her 3 Excel discs might have been a bit too powerful, might have been a bit too overpowered. So they said, let's just give her some disc that isn't a 3rd Excel disc, and they just rolled the dice and said, well, let's just give her a charge disc instead. So she just has 2 charge discs for basically no reason. But yeah, she's a Magia character with an insane amount of attack, an absolutely incredible amount of HP, just like her normal, her other witch self. This is gonna get weird. And she also has a decent amount of defense, but it's not that much defense. In case you didn't know this, by the way, her witch version actually had the highest amount of total stats in the entire game, which was mostly due to her having insane amount of HP, but also having the same amount of other stats. And this Isabeau Megoka version, the magical version, also has an insane amount of HP, so this kind of continues. If we take a quick look at her personal memoria, it's not too much to write home about. It has a little bit of attack up, some damage cut, some regen HP. For the most part, this doesn't really matter too much, mostly because it doesn't specifically try to focus on one specific stat like attack, and instead it has a whole selection of different effects, which usually isn't that great. Usually it's better if a memoria focuses on one specific type of effect instead of having multiple types of effect on it, like something like attack and crit. They're both just for damage, right? But here we have something that's for damage but also is defensive and regenerate HP, like spreading between offensive and defensive. Usually offensive and defensive, yeah, usually doesn't quite work out. And in this case, it's still a good memoria, it's still a decently powerful personal, but it's not going to be powerful than a lot of 4-star memoria that are specifically designed to make your character stronger offensively. Moving on though, we have a connect that gives attack up, dark attribute attack up. This is something that I'm going to see a little bit more of, and also gives some curse on attack. Now the curse is fine. Curse is an extremely powerful effect when it comes to ailments, but we know that currently their ailments themselves just don't really do that much on enemies. Ailments are really powerful when they hit you, but ailments aren't that powerful when they hit enemies. Apart from, of course, stuff like charm, stun, and bind, like taking away enemy turns is really powerful. But apart from that, ailments don't really do much to enemies, especially because, as I bring up every single time, ailments on multi-target bosses only affect a single tile, and all the other tiles act as if they aren't hit by an ailment, which kind of sucks. So the connect specifically for dark characters is actually pretty darn good, but for anything but dark characters is kind of mediocre. Moving on, the important part is, because she's a Magia character, you would expect her to have an extremely powerful Magia ability, or double ability even. I'm gonna skip the Magia ability this time because realistically, you're only gonna use her double anyway. So it's attribute strength and damage to all enemies with combined with her insane amount of attack means that, yeah, you're probably gonna use her on Kimochi. You're probably gonna use her as a damage dealer against a light type Kimochi, which I think is the Opal Kimochi. It also does curse to all enemies, which, I mean, gives you 3 turns of curse against the center tile, but only the center tile, as I mentioned before, so it's more damage, but it could have been better. It also gives Magia damage up to self for 5 turns, which is actually insane, and it also gives Dark Attribute attack up to self, which is also kind of insane. And then it gives Survive, but who the fuck cares about Survive? This is a unit that is specifically gonna be great for Kimochi. Why is it good for Kimochi? Because it's attribute strength and damage, and because it has good self buffs, or just good buffs in general. And something that is attribute strength and has good self buffs is usually specifically good for Kimochi, because that is exactly the situation where you would like to have really strong buffs and attribute strengthened damage Kimochi. A double, which is against the Kimochi. And against the Kimochi, something like Survive just doesn't really make sense, because a Kimochi is never ever going to ever be able to kill a unit like this. Like 41,000 HP. This Isabeau is never gonna even get close to dying against the Kimochi. Unless you like solo, but solo Isabeau just makes no goddamn sense against the Kimochi. But, so yeah, this Survive is kind of useless, but of course outside of Kimochi, a Survive might actually be really useful. If you're doing 100 evils, for example, specifically the 100 evils during this event, 100 evils, the third wave, the third mission is actually incredibly fucking hard. This is one of the hardest 100 evils we've seen in a long time. So something like Survive might actually be important, might actually be really powerful. But outside of this specific 100 evils, you're probably not going to make too much use of this Survive unless you have a really fresh account. And if you have a fresh account, any strong character is going to be good for you. But since she's specifically a Kimochi character, how good is she going to be for Kimochi? Well, let's go over the Spirit Enhancement before we put down our verdict for how good she of a Kimochi unit she is. She has some excellent peek and up, sure, evade, doesn't matter. Magia damage up, nice. Anti-curse, doesn't matter. You see her double, she has an additional double adapt, which actually has really powerful effects. Like, this is the normal double adapt up here. It's like 5% and 5%, not a whole lot. But then she has this bonus double adapt, which is 20% double damage up. 20%? That's a lot. That is actually a fucking lot. Together with another 7.5% Magia damage up. Keep in mind that Magia damage also applies to doubles, so double dips for doubles. Wow. Then on top of that, you have light damage cut, which doesn't matter that much. MP gain up, nice, 15%. That is actually a decent amount to really make sure you get a lot of MP, especially because she has regenerate MP every turn, 9 MP, which gets increased by this 15%. And then her active is 18 MP to herself, which also gets increased by the 15% from the MP gain up. So she actually, just with these two effects, or these three effects if you count the MP gain up itself, is able to have a lot of MP generation herself, which is why a lot of people have sort of likened her a little bit to Vampire Kanagi, who also has a lot of MP generation herself. And yeah, to some degree, it's also true that she is someone who is able to generate MP for herself as a dark type unit, of course. She also has chance to curse an attack for 2 turns, which once again is not that incredible. And she also has to curse 1 turn to an enemy. Once again, if there is some sort of patch, some sort of hotfix to the game at some point that makes enemies have multiple tiles afflicted by the status ailments, this would immediately buff this unit right here an insane amount. Like, Isabeau would be so much better if every single tile on a multi-tile boss were inflicted by a Stellar's ailment. But even aside from that, she has a lot of MP generation, like a lot of MP generation herself, which allows her to get to doubles fast. She has a lot of double bonuses from just SE, and when she doubles, she has added strength damage for a lot of damage, and then she buffs herself for a lot of damage, meaning that her increased doubles afterwards are going to be even more powerful. So overall, she's just really fucking good at hitting light type Kimochis for really high damage. And this kind of brings us already to our verdict for this character. Isabeau, the normal version, not the witch version. I need to mention this. This version of Isabeau is incredibly powerful, specifically against light type Kimochi as a DPS. But do keep in mind, she buffs herself. So if you put some other damage dealer next to her, that other damage dealer that is next to her is not gonna get any of the cool buffs. She only buffs herself. So you probably want to have other characters like Mikage, like for example the new Kuroe, which actually releases next week, to maybe buff this Isabeau instead for the next light type Kimochi, to make sure you get maximum damage. But yeah, overall she is an insanely powerful damage dealer for double spamming against the light type Kimochi. Outside of that, because she has attribute strength and damage, which that just means she does less damage against anything that isn't light type, and because she buffs herself and only buffs herself, you kind of want to spam it. And in a situation where you're not spamming it, like let's say for example you're doing an EX challenge quest where one double just ends the battle immediately, which in most EX challenges will be the case, where like one double and the battle is over. This doesn't really make any sense to use in a quest like that, because what's the point of buffing yourself if the battle is over after one double, right? So is this maybe something for 100 evils, but then in 100 evils, I guess it still makes sense to keep spamming doubles over and over, especially on that later quests. So maybe this is something you might want to use on 100 evils, but the primary use is still to use in Kimochi as a damage dealer against the light type Kimochi. Similar to Kush, for example. Kush is also really good in that situation. But if you don't have Kush, for example, for the light Kimochi, then maybe you can use this Isabeau instead. So overall, incredibly solid Magia type character for the dark type to spam repeated doubles with self buffs to make sure you hit even harder, specifically against light types. But she has not a whole lot of synergy with everyone else. She's a very selfish, egotistical kind of character, as you would expect from someone who is, you know, very evil. That said, she has a very nice smile. Look at that smile. She's like, ah! Very, very nice smile. 100% smile right there. She's also German, by the way. I know she's the French king, but there was just a thing in the medieval ages, in the Middle Ages, it was kind of like normal for people to marry princes and kings of another country to act as their consort. Like if you were a German princess, like she was, you just get married off to some other country for political gain. That's just how the Middle Ages worked. So she was actually Elisabeth von Bayern in German, and just became the French princess and later the French queen when the king died. And she tried to sell off France to the English because she thought that was the best thing to do. You know, Middle Ages. Moving on though, there's also a Memoria, a 4-star Memoria that is part of her gacha. That's the Penal gacha. But yeah, she has her own gacha with the 4-star Memoria as well. And it's not that good, to be honest. Like her 4-star Memoria gives attack up 20%. It's only 20%. You know how many Memoria are out there that give 25%, which is just so much better. So instead of getting 25% and maybe some other offensive effect, what do you get? You get Curse for 1 turn to the target, 20% chance, which is kind of bad, which is not very good. Really not very good. And defense up. I mean, if you're trying to do 100 evils maybe, and 100 evils where you might actually die and where it might be hard to get through the entire quest, maybe getting something like a 30% defense up might be important. But if you're not really gonna die at all, this is kind of a wasted effect. And yeah, the curse is a really low chance for only 1 turn, which is also not that amazing, to be honest. So overall, for this being a limited gacha Memoria, it's not that great. It's actually not that great of a Memoria, sadly. that was that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and I'll see you guys next time.